I have seen a lot of people struggle, small businessmen, especially hiring managers who do not understand the tech field and yet they need to hire someone. So they either end up hiring someone incorrect or wrong or inappropriate or send suffer losses. So this is going to be a good guide for them. Now, the title I gave this is Understanding an Engineering Field Limits and a Hiring Guide. So even students or the normal person out there can understand what an engineer, all right, an engineer is an engineer, but sometimes you expect too much from an engineer. So what to expect from an engineer? What to expect from an electronics engineer? What to expect from a software engineer? What to expect from a civil engineer? Because for the layman or the normal person, they think if they are hiring one engineer, he or she will know everything under the sun about that. So that is not the case. So let's dive down and get right into it and see what the differences are. Now, first I'll start with this, the Google definition of list of engineering branches. As you can see, you have computer science engineering, you have electronics and communication engineering, you have electrical engineering, mechanical, information technology, civil, chemical, and so forth. The list goes on. Now, what are these guys? If you say you want an electronics engineer or a software engineer, I personally myself want for interviews in which they've said, oh, you are a software engineer or you're an IT engineer or you have an expertise in this field. All right, fine. We want you to handle our servers. We also want you to handle our network. We also want you to develop these softwares. Even though they might not have any understanding of the methodologies of designing software, but they've heard agile. It's a very popular word. So they use agile, use Scrum. All right, fine. I'm one-person team, and I have to use Scrum. That's great. Okay, so the person who understands this will be laughing at the moment, and they will agree with what I'm saying, most probably and hopefully. But nonetheless, coming back to the point. Now, if you hire an electronics engineer, for example, like say electronics and communication engineering, now, yes, the broad spectrum is electronics, yes, electrical, yes, mechanical, yes, civil engineering, yes, okay. But what you as a hiring manager or as the boss need to understand that there are limits to and there's different sub branches inside each engineering field. For example, I'm not sure, I've not studied civil, but I'll give you an example from civil engineering, that is. Now, there is a civil engineer who makes houses, all right, basements, ground floor, top floor, so forth. He condos. He or she is experienced, and they have studied that particular segment in civil engineering. Now, there is also a civil engineer who makes dams, water dams, right? They're big, they're huge, they're completely different from making houses, yet they are still under civil engineering. And they're also called a civil engineer. Then there is another type of an engineer, I believe there has to be one, who they make high rises, right? So I believe if you compare making a high rise building, hundreds of floors, and you take building a house, see? They're both civil engineering, but they are different. So I hope you're starting to get the point what I'm trying to make here, that there are different branches. Now all this is physics, right? You might as well just hire a physicist and say, all right, I want you to do, you're a physicist? Okay, I want you to do my IT for me. I want you to do my electronics for me. I want you to make a satellite for me. I want you to do the civil engineering for me. Now, if a person is a master's in physics, that does not mean that that person will know everything about these subjects. So similarly, even though all these come under physics, they are further subdivided. Now, if you go into electronics, communication is a different branch. Antennas, radios, power electronics is different. Robotics is different. So you have different categories inside that. Now, to give you a quick understanding what I'm trying to say, because talk is cheap, so I'm going to try and give you an example from this. Where is that? Here it is. Okay. Now let's take this for example. Okay, I'm basically from this side, so I'm going to give you an example of from here, more or less. Saying. So let's take this guy first. Server, the server, right? Now, what is there in a server? You want to hire someone to handle your servers, okay? Now, let's say servers can be Linux or they can be Windows, popular. Okay, two versions. Now you want a system administrator, right? So a system administrator is, it doesn't mean that a system administrator or server administrator will know everything under the sun or be experienced or well versed or would have studied both. Now either you can study Windows or you can study Linux, but mostly people do both. But you have to understand these are different fields, because under Linux you have, for example, Red Hat. Okay, you have what are the CentOS and so forth. There are multitude of other operating systems. Oops, oops, that's bad. That's bad. Let me get that back. Okay, and I don't know where that went. So that's the case. Anyway, let me just quickly write that down again so you can understand. Red Hat, CentOS, Ubuntu. Okay. Now, Windows itself has two. Uh, One is, I think they call it the messaging or mail, where they have the mail. I'm forgetting exactly what's the name. I'm so sorry about that. And the second one is the Windows Server, the R2 or whatever. Now, what you have to understand in these both, that it's not as simple as Linux has Red Hat, it has CentOS, and it has Ubuntu, or if you have installed Windows, it has the mail server and it has the R2 server, whichever their recent version is. But you have to understand that each and every one of these guys, if you take Red Hat, if you take Ubuntu, if you take CentOS, they have constantly different versions and editions coming up. So things are constantly changing. They are being updated. You have to study, you have to keep in touch with that field to know what is exactly happening. What are the new features? How to implement those new features? Is it appropriate to do that or not? Similarly, you have the same thing here, that you have their different versions every few years, 2 years, 3 years. I think I don't know the life cycle of it, but the new versions keep coming out, so you have to stay in touch. Okay. Now I'll give you another example. From the servers, you have the internet. Okay. Let's just take these guys, the network guys. Okay. Now, for the normal or the layman person, now this is all I'm talking about the IT field, in the IT field, on the ICT field. Okay, so you can understand what I'm trying to say by each engineering field is subdivided into different categories. Okay, because running a server is completely different from running a desktop. There are different things, there are different measures, there are different commands. It's a completely different ballgame. You don't even most probably have a graphical user interface like this. All you have is a command line. So nonetheless, they do have that as well, but I'm just saying in general. Now, if you switch over to the internet, now you have your Wi-Fi router, you have your switches, you have the internet coming in. Now, it's not as simple as your home network that you might think that the network guy's job is just to put the plug in and fine, everyone has their network and the internet is working. It goes well beyond that. I'll give you a good example from here. This is how complicated networks can get. Okay, yes. So all those lines and dots and circles and rounds and servers, yes, they mean something. Yeah. So it gets very complicated very fast the more you dive down into it. I believe when I was doing Cisco, I've yet to get my certification in it, but I read that there was a 70 to 80% dropout ratio, and that is one of the highest ratios I believe in any field when you go into IT. Now, if you see this, it's not as simple as just plugging in a wire, because there are a lot of things which go on behind the scenes that it's very difficult to explain like this. So coming back here, these are the network guys. You have to study all the networks and do this and so forth. Now, remaining inside IT, okay, you have this desktop. Okay. Now, in this desktop, what you might have is again Linux desktop or Windows 8, 10, 7, whatever. And Linux can be one, it can be whichever one. So now you have two operating systems, fine. But what about the development environment, software engineers? Now you say you want to hire a software engineer, fine, okay. Now I'm saying a software engineer should know this, he should know everything, he or she should know everything under the sun. It does not work that way. Now if you just bring it over here, this desktop, I'll try and show it to you over here. I'll write it over here, okay, above the laptop. So they say, you say you need a programmer. Now PHP is one language, Java is one language, Java EE is something else, Android is something else. It's then C sharp. Where's my sharp? Okay, C sharp is something else. And you have MVC, different kinds of methodologies to develop a software. Then you have Python, you have Ruby, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So there are a multitude of languages in which you develop softwares. Each have their pros and cons, their positives and their negatives. And going further, when you make websites, there are a host of different technologies in that as well. It's not as simple as just one or two things, as HTML or CSS, and you can just put up a website. You can do that in the simplest sense, but not really. Like you can't make a professional website anymore with just knowing HTML and CSS. There are a host of other different technologies which go into that, so you have to study them as well. Now, the guy who handles your IP phone, okay, here, these guys, the IP phone, where let's take this for example. The IP phone, which is on your system or your laptop or your desktop or your system that you're working on. Now, it can be that you downloaded something ready-made, but if you have got your own software developed where you have your own IP telephony, for example like Asterix, then there's a person who has studied Asterix specifically in IP telephony, and now he or she is completely different from the software side, and relatively speaking, because that's a completely different. IP telephony is again something different. Connecting and making, they're two different things. Network guys can connect it, but they can't make it. Some people expect network guys to also create a telephony system for them, like Asterix. It doesn't work that way. So I believe you get the general idea now that when you want to hire someone, especially in the engineering field, it is not as simple as I want a software engineer, I want a mechanical engineer, I want a civil engineer. Okay, you want a civil engineer, fine. You hire the cheapest civil engineer you can, and then you say, all right, fine, now I want you to make this multi-billion-dollar dam for me, the water dam. He or she is going to go like, well, my specialty is somewhere else, right? So you can't expect one engineering field or one person in one specific field to know everything and all the sub branches in that field. It is like hiring one physicist and firing all your engineers and asking the physicist to do the work of all those engineers, regardless of whichever branch they are in. So it just does not work that way. So you have to understand what are your requirements, and you have to go according to the requirements. Now, one of the major problem and the hurdles you will face there is, where do you find the competent person who will tell you or who will guide you, this is what you need, that is not what you need, that is surplus, that is a waste of money, that is overkill. You don't need to hire someone with these many skills because you're not going to be using them. For example, if you're a small business, right, 10 people, 15 people, so forth, small business, you get what I'm saying. You don't need something like this. You don't have multiple floors and hundreds of people working in different departments who have different access configurations, who can access this or but who can't access that. Then they need backups. Then this person should be given that much speed and that person should be given that much speed, and these people should not be allowed to connect to these people, and those people should not be allowed to connect to these people. So you don't need something like that. What you need is something simpler. Now, you don't need a network engineer in these cases. What you do need is maybe a network. Maybe I'm terming it wrong. Please forgive me. But the point I'm trying to make is that you don't need to hire on a permanent basis a network engineer for 10-15 people. It's just it's a relative figure, 10-15 people, but I believe you get the idea what I'm trying to say. So one of the things I've seen in companies, okay, is what happens is the boss or the other people don't really know about the tech stuff, and they hire someone based on references or word of mouth or whatever reason, he or she. Then what happens is an IT or any engineer will implement the system in which he or she is comfortable in. Always remember that. Now, why does your company run Red Hat in its service? Why does it run Windows, right? Because most probably the first person who came there, the first person they hired was comfortable with Red Hat as an operating system for your server, and he installed Red Hat, and it's been Red Hat ever since. There's no logical reason for it, but only because it's there, then the company keeps hiring and keeps going on and keeps building up on that. I've seen major companies, major companies, there are softwares which they make, and it's a nightmare. It's really a nightmare when you see those softwares. It was a company, I believe it was a taxi company in Chicago, and they had a software, and when I looked at that software, I was horrified. It was, even though it was Java and Java EE, but every person they seemed to hire had worked in their own different type of ways. There was no proper planning, execution in which you are taught in software, by the way. It's like you have one website in which you've used Java and you've used PHP and you've used Ruby and you use Python and it's just one website, man. Come on. So you don't need to go there. That's overkill. Not even overkill. It doesn't make any sense. It goes beyond all the norms of what IT teaches you. So coming to an end, it's quite long. So the bottom line is, find out what you need, consult someone who knows what they are talking about, not who you think they know what they're talking about, but who really knows what they're talking about and what are your requirements. And You should not be implementing something in your IT system or your IT ecosystem in your company just because it was more popular then, or there are a lot of things which have to be taken into account: hardware costs, service costs, physical security, power, cooling. So, there are a lot of things you need to take into consideration. You give a laptop to an employee loses it, what about that data? System administrators, database administrators. So it's a really long chain. This was just the tip of the iceberg. So, in conclusion, make a list of what you need. Don't go with it just because one person is saying so, and try to find the right balance between your requirement, your finances. Don't go for overkill, because sooner or later that thing will be obsolete. Keep that in mind. That OS will be obsolete, will be upgraded. That hardware will be obsolete, will be upgraded. A new version would be coming out. It would definitely be modified in some way or the other. So that is the key. Understanding what you need, and if you don't know, finding the right person and talking to that person that this is my need, this is what I need to get done. Now, do I need a technician for it? Do I need an associate engineer for it? Or do I need an engineer for it who makes the system from scratch and you want to make something epic? So that's just about it. And remember, don't expect the world from an engineer. An engineer is just an engineer. Okay? So take care. Bye bye.